Thursday, 3rd and Morrison. The light turned green, and the Tesla in front of me didn't budge. I tapped the horn. The driver glanced back, and my stomach dropped as Colin Reeves, my husband, stared straight at me. Beside him, a copper-haired woman rested a hand on a pregnant belly, eyes wide like she'd stepped into the wrong life. I'm Morgan Blake, Sensuwu, a GIS analyst for Portland's planning office who lives in layers. Timestamps and coordinates. Maps don't lie, people do. Colin kissed me goodbye at 710 a.m., said a late strategy meeting. And here he was in a Volt Art Company Model S I'd never seen, wearing a look I'd never met. Confusion slid into fear like a siren. I put my hazards on, set the Subaru in park, and met his eyes through windshields and 9 years of vows. No speeches, no sheens, just a clean directive. He could drive that shiny lie straight to our house with his pregnant passenger. Because I was giving him 5 minutes of mercy. The countdown started the moment my finger left the horn. Our blue Craftsman house looked exactly the same as it had that morning white trim. Window boxes. Calm and deceiving. I parked in the driveway. Every nerve burning. 2 minutes later, Colin pulled up alone, stepping out like a man rehearsing excuses. I opened the door before he could knock. My voice even. My pulse wild. He started with my name. Soft. Rehearsed. Pathetic. I cut him off. Every word that left his mouth would now be treated as evidence. Not apology. I told him to step inside, to sit down, and to stop pretending this was fixable. My exact line was simple: everything comes out now, or I burn everything down to the foundation. He tried the calm routine. Hands out. Voice low. Saying we could talk like adults. I laughed. A sound too sharp to be mine. Adults don't build 2 lives with joint money and borrowed lies. Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Standing on my porch was the redhead from the Tesla, Harper Quinn. Close up. Terrified. And visibly pregnant. She looked between us like she was realizing the plot twist in real time. Colin froze. I opened the door wider. I told her to come in. Because if this was going to collapse, it would collapse with witnesses. Colin sat on the edge of our couch like a man waiting for sentencing. Harper hovered near the doorway, clutching her stomach, pretending she wasn't eavesdropping. I stayed standing. Power belongs to whoever doesn't sit down first. My voice was steady when I asked him to start from the beginning, no summaries. No excuses. Just dates. He said it began at a company mixer in February. That it just happened. I asked when it stopped being conversation and became a lie. His eyes shifted. Shoulders tensed. And he muttered late March. I reminded him that March was our anniversary trip to Cannon Beach. The one where he told me I was his forever. When he claimed it was only emotional at first. I reached for my phone and showed the text he'd sent me the night before, a heart emoji and a promise to come home early. I let the silence stretch until it cracked. He looked at Harper as if she might save him. But she was pale and shaking, realizing her story was built on the same lies as mine. I kept going. Who paid for the apartment? Whose name was on the lease? Which account covered the Tesla? Each answer cornered him tighter. Every explanation unraveled another thread. When he tried to call it complicated, I told him complexity doesn't steal $60,000 in 12 months. It takes planning. And the man who'd once mapped out bridge blueprints just watched his own life collapse in perfect symmetry. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open. Coffee gone cold. And every shared password I'd ever memorized. Years of trust became data points, bank transfers, credit logs, travel receipts. I wasn't angry anymore. I was methodical. Betrayal looks different under fluorescent light at 2 in the morning. It looks like numbers. By 3 a.m. The first pattern appeared. Small transfers from our joint account, each between $500 and $800, spaced 10 to 14 days apart. Not enough to raise a flag, but consistent enough to map like clockwork. I totaled them all $60,000 siphoned in 13 months. Each withdrawal labeled client expenses. Then came the mileage logs from Colin's Voltark company car. I exported the GPS data and overlaid it on my GIS mapping software. The coordinates clustered around a single block in the Pearl District, the same address as the apartment Harper admitted to renting. His official reports listed those drives as site visits in Lake Oswego. My cursor hovered over the red dots and smiled. Data doesn't lie. By dawn, I had screenshots of his emails, the lease showing both their names, and photos from Harper's now private Instagram that matched the interior furniture. Even the lamp I'd bought last Christmas sat in her living room. I labeled every file, cross-referenced dates, and stacked the evidence like a professional audit. When the first light hit the kitchen window, I renamed the folder Operation Ember, because if Colin wanted to play with fire, I was going to make sure it burned clean and documented. By morning, I had a folder thick enough to qualify as a thesis on marital misconduct. I called Dana Whitaker, a divorce attorney I knew through a friend, and she agreed to meet within the hour. Her office smelled like polished wood and quiet victories. I handed her the file, watching her eyes move from one screenshot to another, her expression shifting from curiosity to cold precision. Dana didn't waste time. She said we'd file for divorce fast and hard, with a motion for temporary orders to freeze every shared asset. The inheritance my mother left would be treated as separate property, and Colin's misuse of it could qualify as financial misconduct. She added that the company lease misuse and falsified mileage reports could expose him to both corporate and tax penalties. I listened carefully. Every word, another steel beam in the structure I was building. For the first time since that red light, the chaos felt contained. Dana told me to move quickly, transfer my half of the joint funds legally, change the locks, document every item in the house, and stop talking to Colin entirely. I left her office with a checklist. Not a heartbreak. The rules were simple now. Stay calm, stay factual, and let the law do what love couldn't. I started with the bank. Half of our joint balance went into my personal account, perfectly legal in Oregon once separation was in motion. Then I called the locksmith, a man named Tony who didn't ask questions, just changed the deadbolts and handed me 3 new keys. The locks clicked into place like punctuation marks at the end of a long, ugly sentence. Next came the credit cards. I reported mine as lost and requested replacements, effectively freezing Colin's access. The mortgage company noted that no refinancing could occur without my written consent, and our insurance agent confirmed the same. By the time the coffee pot finished brewing, every financial artery leading to Colin Reeves was sealed shut. But the real satisfaction came from the corporate side. I sent an anonymous email to Voltark's accounting department, politely flagging possible discrepancies between Colin's reported client trips and actual mileage logs. I attached no names, just dates, times, and coordinates. It was clinical, not cruel. And I pressed send without hesitation. When the last task was done, I sat in the quiet house, surrounded by the sound of nothing moving. For months, he'd run 2 lives in parallel, confident I'd never notice the drift. That morning, every route he'd built closed at once. I wasn't chasing him anymore. I was cutting off his fuel supply. The hearing took place 5 days after I filed. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Too bright. Too quiet, with every sound echoing off polished wood. Colin sat at the opposite table in a wrinkled suit, his lawyer whispering directions he clearly wasn't absorbing. He looked like someone trying to bluff through a test he hadn't studied for. Dana was composed, sharp as glass. She presented the evidence I'd built: bank statements, lease contracts, falsified transfers, and screenshots of the Tesla mileage report. When she finished, the courtroom felt like it had already decided. The judge, a woman named Elkins, adjusted her glasses and read through the pages in silence that stretched like judgment itself. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, but final. Misappropriation of marital funds, forged signatures on financial documents, deception supported by tangible proof. She granted me temporary, sole possession of the house, exclusive access to all accounts, and a repayment plan for my inheritance. Colin was ordered to pay me $2,000 a month in spousal support until the final decree. His lawyer protested, citing the upcoming birth of his child. Judge Elkins didn't flinch. She said actions have consequences, and this court wasn't responsible for cushioning self-inflicted ones. I caught Colin's eyes for one brief second before he looked away. When it was over, I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I'd entered. Justice didn't need volume. It needed evidence, and I had all of it. 3 weeks after the hearing, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Colin's voice was shaky, panicked, almost unrecognizable. Harper had gone into labor early, and the hospital needed a deposit that he couldn't cover. He said the insurance wouldn't process fast enough, that everything was complicated, that he needed help. I sat up, turned on the lamp, and told him he already owed me $2,000 this month. He said that money was supposed to be for rent. I reminded him that rent was no longer my concern. There was a long pause on the other end, followed by a soft, desperate plea that dissolved into silence when I hung up. At sunrise, I poured coffee and checked my email. Dana had forwarded a message from Voltark's legal department confirming Colin's termination. The internal audit I'd quietly triggered had uncovered mileage fraud stretching back 18 months. They'd repossessed the Tesla, frozen his benefits, and referred the case for review by their tax compliance division. In a single week, he'd gone from corporate management to unemployed with a newborn. By noon, his lawyer reached out to Dana, proposing a settlement. He would surrender the house, repay the inheritance in installments, and request that I waive spousal support moving forward. I didn't answer right away. I told Dana I wanted to wait, to see just how far the fall would go. Revenge wasn't about speed. It was about precision, and gravity was finally working in my favor. When Dana relayed Colin's offer, I told her I would settle, but only on my terms. He would sign the house over to me immediately, not after paperwork lingered for months. The $60,000 he'd stolen would be repaid in full, $45,000 within the week. The rest spread over 2 years with interest. Dana hesitated for a moment, asking if I was sure about pressing that hard. I said it wasn't pressure. It was accountability. Then I added one more condition. Colin would write a letter. Not to me, but to his daughter with Harper. In it, he would explain everything: how he lied, how he stole, how choices ripple through lives. The letter would be sealed until she was old enough to read it. A record of truth from the man who'd once built bridges but burned every one that mattered. Harper's mother, desperate to give the baby stability, agreed to help cover the repayment. I didn't feel satisfaction, only balance. There's a difference. The world doesn't know closure, but sometimes it offers structure. I signed my half of the settlement knowing I wasn't taking revenge anymore. I was finalizing consequences. In the end, it wasn't about winning. It was about making sure the story stayed honest. No matter how uncomfortable the truth was to read, by spring, their carefully built fantasy collapsed under its own weight. Harper moved back in with her parents in Eugene, exhausted and broke, the newborn tucked between regret and sleeplessness. Colin stayed behind in Beaverton, renting a room with 2 co-workers from a construction crew that paid just enough to keep him afloat. Their contact was limited to scheduled custody exchanges organized by Harper's mother, who no longer trusted either of them to manage it alone. From what Dana later confirmed, the separation wasn't dramatic, no shouting. No scandal. Just quiet resignation. The kind of silence that follows when two people realize they were never partners, only co-conspirators in denial. Colin had traded ambition for damage control, spending his days hauling blueprints he once supervised. Harper stopped posting online altogether. Her last picture was of a baby's hand, and the caption starting over. I didn't gloat. Watching them unravel felt less like victory and more like weather inevitable. Predictable. Deserved. People like Colin and Harper don't implode overnight. They erode. One unpaid bill. One sleepless night. One truth too heavy to ignore. And somewhere in that erosion, justice stopped needing my participation. It was already doing fine on its own. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. I repainted the living room a shade of sage green, Colin once called too muted, hung my students' artwork on the walls, and filled the empty shelves with plants instead of framed wedding photos. Every small change felt like reclaiming square footage of my own peace. Quiet mornings became my favorite sound. Financially, I stabilized faster than I expected. With the house fully mine and my accounts secure, I started saving again, small amounts. Steady habits. The same skills that made me a good analyst worked just as well for rebuilding a life. I tracked progress like a dataset, fewer nightmares. More laughter. Steady heart rate when someone mentioned his name. By month 4, I started dating again. It wasn't about replacing anyone, just proof that I could trust myself to choose better. One man, Marcus, a librarian with kind eyes and an offbeat sense of humor, made me laugh so hard I forgot to measure the moment. We lasted 3 dates before realizing we wanted different things. And that was fine. It felt like growth ending something without destruction. I saw Colin once at Target, pushing a cart of diapers and off-brand coffee. He looked older. Smaller. I didn't feel anger or triumph. Just distance. That's when I knew I was free. The map of my life no longer had his coordinates on it. 6 months after that red light, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. The return address read Dana Whitaker and Associates, and I already knew what it contained. The divorce decree was final. Colin Reeves and I were legally done. No fanfare. No courtroom. Just ink on paper confirming what had been true for months. I sat at the kitchen table and read it once. Slowly. The house was mine. The $60,000 repayment schedule had been honored down to the last cent. The final transfer completed that morning. Linda Quinn, Harper's mother, had sent a brief note with it. For Melody's future, I hope this brings peace. I believed she meant it. I closed the folder, slid it into a drawer, and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time, it didn't taste like survival. It tasted like closure. The walls around me no longer echoed with arguments or secrets. Just music. The low hum of the dishwasher. And my own breathing steady in the quiet. Half of that final payment went to a women's shelter downtown. The rest I kept for a trip I'd been planning quietly for months, Florence. To see the Uffizi in person. I'd earned that flight. That freedom. The case was closed. The damage counted. The map redrawn. And for once, there was nothing left to fix. A week after the decree, I was cleaning old files off my laptop when I found an archived email thread labeled transfer request. It was from Colin to his supervisor at Voltark. Dated 3 months before I caught him at that red light. He'd been requesting a relocation to the San Francisco office. Citing my wife and I have discussed new opportunities out west. My name had been part of a plan I never knew existed. I read it twice. The words flattening any trace of nostalgia I'd been holding. He hadn't just cheated, He'd been planning an exit strategy while sleeping beside me. Every document I uncovered after that, the lease, the transfers, the falsified reports fit neatly into that blueprint of escape. For a moment, I wondered if he'd ever meant to tell me or just disappear one day, leaving silence and debt behind. The thought didn't hurt. It only confirmed something I'd already learned. Some betrayals are logistics disguised as love. The following fall, I stood in my classroom hanging a new painting above the whiteboard, an abstract swirl of blues and golds I'd titled Ember Rising. One of my students asked what it meant, and I told her it was about rebuilding, about how something can burn completely and still be beautiful afterward. She nodded like she understood, though she was only 16. Maybe understanding doesn't depend on age. Maybe it just takes surviving something. The divorce papers were filed away now, buried in a cabinet I rarely opened. My life was smaller but lighter morning walks, coffee that stayed hot, art that wasn't interrupted by arguments. The peace felt earned, not borrowed. I'd stopped checking social media, stopped wondering if Colin ever looked back. That spring, I booked a ticket to Florence. No announcements, no grand declarations. Just one quiet choice to see the world on my own terms. Betrayal had rewritten my map once, but this time, I held the pen. The real story wasn't about what I lost. It was about everything I built once I stopped mistaking endurance for love. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.